Major cities stand tall as the beating hearts of modern civilization, but in an apocalypse, those same towering skylines become
Keep pushing,
some of
we're
the
almost
deadliest
through!
places
Hurry,
on
the
Earth.
fire's spreading.
What once
Help
felt
us!
vibrant, electric, and full of opportunity quickly mutates into a suffocating maze where millions of terrified people collide in desperation. The very things that made cities thrive, density, infrastructure, constant movement, turn against their inhabitants the moment order collapses. Fear surges faster than any infection, and the sheer volume of humanity becomes its own catastrophic force. As power grids fail and maintenance stops, the city decays with shocking speed. Elevators freeze between floors, trapping people inside metallic coffins suspended in darkness. Water pressure drops until taps spit dust. Streets clog with abandoned cars, turning major highways into unmoving metal rivers. Collapsed buildings block entire intersections, forming impassable barricades of shattered concrete and twisted steel. Every step becomes a gamble. Every alley hides a threat. But the greatest danger isn't the environment,
Keep pushing,
it's
we're
the
almost
people.
through!
When
Hurry, the
supplies
fire's
vanish,
spreading.
Help
each
us!
survivor becomes competition. Pharmacies empty in minutes. Grocery stores erupt in violence. Neighbors turn suspicious, then hostile. Those who once walked side by side now fight over the last bottles of water, the last packets of medicine, the last remaining pockets of safety. Even the authorities, overwhelmed and desperate, become unpredictable. Quarantine zones trap the healthy with the infected. Military strikes level neighborhoods in a futile attempt to regain control. Smoke rises from fires no one is left to extinguish. The skyline, once a symbol of human achievement, becomes a graveyard of cold, silent towers. In an apocalypse, the city doesn't just fall, it consumes everything within it. Hospitals in ordinary life stand as sanctuaries of healing, bright, sterile, reassuring, but in an apocalypse, these structures collapse into the most treacherous breeding grounds for chaos and death. The moment the first wave of panic sweeps through a city, every person with a cough, fever, wound, or fear of infection rushes straight to the emergency room. Hallways overflow long before the sun sets on day one. Stretchers jam every corridor. Families scream for help no one is capable of giving. And beneath all of this noise, something far more dangerous spreads, the invisible, unstoppable tide of disease. What kills you in a hospital during an apocalypse is not the lack of medicine, it's the sheer concentration of sick and dying people packed together. It's like stepping into a pressure cooker full of germs, fear, and desperation. Ventilation systems circulate contaminated air through every ward, coughs echo like sirens. Every surface becomes a battlefield of bacteria and viruses. A single infected patient can start a chain reaction that overwhelms hundreds in a matter of hours. The building transforms into a massive biological amplifier, multiplying whatever catastrophe caused the collapse of society in the first place. Then the staff begins to disappear. Doctors and nurses, trained to save lives, must make a cruel choice: stay and risk dying with their patients, or flee to protect their own families. Most leave. Those who stay are quickly overwhelmed, exhausted, or infected. With no professionals left to manage the chaos, the hospital becomes a frantic, lawless zone. Well, now, patients fight over antibiotics. Families break into locked rooms, searching for supplies. The sound of shattering glass mixes with the helpless cries of people too weak to defend themselves. And even if you somehow avoid the disease, you face another terrifying threat: human panic. When order breaks, every waiting room becomes a riot. People trample each other for access to dwindling medicine. Desperate individuals storm supply closets. Strangers clash in the hallways over the last bandages or bottles of water. Fear turns everyone into a weapon. Inside a hospital, death lingers around every corner, not just from infection, but from the violence, the chaos, and the hopelessness that spreads faster than any virus. The lights flicker. Machines beep their final alarms. Bodies lie unattended as the building sinks deeper into its own hell. Walking through those automatic doors might feel like searching for salvation. But in an apocalypse, a hospital is the last place you'll ever want to be, because it becomes the first place where people die without even realizing they've already lost. Stadiums designed to hold roaring crowds and unforgettable victories become colossal death traps the moment society collapses. In an apocalypse, their massive open spaces, once symbols of unity, turn into arenas of terror where tens of thousands of desperate people collide, compete, and crumble. The very scale that once made these places impressive now makes them catastrophic. A single stadium can swallow a small city's population, but when panic strikes, it cannot protect a single soul. Governments clinging to failing protocols often designate stadiums as emergency shelters. On paper, it sounds logical. Wide spaces, robust structures, controlled entry points. But in reality, those same entry points become narrow funnels of chaos. People surge toward the gates driven by fear, hope, or pure instinct. It takes only one infected person or one terrified crowd to turn those bottlenecks into crushing waves of bodies. Screams drown out reason. Push becomes stampede, and once inside, nobody truly escapes. The interior of a stadium is a nightmare magnified. Tens of thousands of frightened families crammed together with no privacy, no protection, and no trust. Supplies meant to last a few days for a few hundred responders are suddenly expected to sustain an ocean of panicking survivors. Water jugs empty by morning, food disappears before sunset. By nightfall, the crowd becomes a restless organism fueled by hunger, suspicion, and exhaustion. Sanitation collapses almost instantly. Bathrooms overflow, makeshift beds fill the hallways. The smell of sweat, sickness, and fear thickens the air. Every cough becomes a threat. Every fever becomes a warning sign. The moment someone collapses or shows signs of infection, panic ripples through the crowd like electricity. People shove, scream, and stampede toward exits that cannot possibly hold them. Guards lose control. Fights ignite across the stands. The sound of conflict echoes where cheers once lived. And then comes the worst part, the predators, not just infected, but ruthless survivors who see a packed stadium as an effortless buffet. Once the gates are breached, whether by zombies or armed raiders, the stadium's shape works against you. There are no hiding spots, no choke points, no safe corners. The open bowl becomes a slaughterhouse where thousands cannot escape fast enough. From the highest seats to the lowest tunnels, every path spirals into panic and bloodshed. A stadium in an apocalypse isn't just dangerous, it's unavoidable doom. A place where a single mistake becomes a mass tragedy, where hope turns into hysteria, and where tens of thousands realize too late that the safest looking shelter is nothing more than a giant echoing cage. Public transportation hubs, airports, train stations, bus terminals are built to move entire populations smoothly, but in an apocalypse, these places transform into colossal traps where mobility collapses, disease spreads with terrifying speed, and thousands of panicked people become hopelessly stranded. What once symbolized connection to the world becomes a labyrinth of locked gates, malfunctioning systems, and suffocating crowds, all begging to escape the same nightmare. Airports are the first to fall. Their long security lines and narrow checkpoints instantly clog with desperate travelers trying to flee. The moment panic erupts, those queues dissolve into violent surges of bodies smashing against barriers, abandoning luggage, and trampling anyone who hesitates. TSA checkpoints become battlegrounds. Baggage carousels overflow into chaotic mounds of personal belongings. And above it all, the ventilation systems circulate the same contaminated air through every terminal, turning the entire building into one vast respiratory hazard. Inside train stations, the situation is no better. Platforms overflow with thousands of people waiting for trains that will never return. Conductors disappear, alarms wail, and abandoned carts block tracks. Crowds collapse into shouting matches as rumors spread. A train is coming, a flight has reopened, a gate just unlocked. None of it is true. Hope becomes a weapon, and desperation becomes the spark for violence. Every delay fuels chaos. Every whisper fuels panic. Bus terminals transform fastest of all. Engines shut off, drivers flee, security staff vanish as soon as the crowds turn hostile. The smell of sweat and fear clings to the halls as passengers realize no one is coming to save them. People climb over each other to reach exits that lead nowhere, trapped within the building's narrow design and surrounded by streets already jammed with abandoned vehicles. And the greatest danger is the air itself. These buildings are sealed environments with recycled air, perfect incubators for any airborne contagion. One infected cough can sweep through a terminal in minutes. By the time you notice symptoms in one person, dozens are already sick, and hundreds more are breathing the same recycled atmosphere. When the lights flicker, when announcements fall silent, when the last plane is grounded and the last train is locked in its depot, the true horror sets in. You're in a structure built to funnel people straight into dead ends. Gates don't open, tracks don't move, tarmacs become graveyards for silent aircraft. You're trapped with thousands of terrified strangers in a giant, pressurized bottle of panic. In an apocalypse, public transportation hubs don't lead you to safety. They trap you in a cage where escape is an illusion, disease is guaranteed, and survival becomes a race against the very air you breathe. Highways and evacuation routes are supposed to be humanity's lifelines during disaster, but in an apocalypse, they quickly transform into sprawling steel graveyards, miles of frozen vehicles, desperate families, and suffocating heat, trapped beneath a sky that offers no mercy. What begins as a frantic attempt to flee becomes a slow, grinding surrender as every inch of road clogs with cars that can't move forward, can't turn around, and can't escape the nightmare crawling steadily toward them. The danger begins the moment the evacuation alert goes out. Millions of people surge onto the same stretches of asphalt, funneling into narrow lanes bordered by concrete dividers. These barriers, meant to protect during normal traffic, become walls that imprison thousands. It only takes a single stalled engine, a frightened driver swerving, or a minor collision to trap an entire column of vehicles. Within minutes, the highway grinds to a halt. Within hours, it becomes an immovable river of metal stretching to the horizon. Inside the cars, the situation deteriorates with terrifying speed. Engines idle until tanks run dry. Air conditioning fails, turning metallic cabins into ovens. Water bottles empty as the sun beats down. Children cry from heat and hunger. People abandon their vehicles in search of help, leaving doors hanging open and belongings scattered across the road like remnants of a lost civilization. And that's when the predators arrive. Raiders move through the gridlocked highway like shoppers browsing aisles, checking vehicles for supplies and vulnerable survivors. With no protection, no escape paths, and no way to maneuver, every stranded family becomes a target. Even worse, the infected, or whatever threat caused the collapse, can follow the same trails. Zombies, mutants, or desperate humans can walk faster than traffic moves. The highway becomes a conveyor belt delivering victims directly into the jaws of danger. But the nightmare doesn't end there. In government attempts to contain outbreaks, highways often become designated hot zones. Drones circle overhead, military units set up barricades. If the threat spreads too far or too fast, command centers may make the unthinkable decision: eliminate the entire route. A single missile or airstrike turns the highway into a blazing inferno, vaporizing thousands who believed they were escaping. Even without violence, the environment itself becomes lethal. Summer heat dehydrates survivors within hours. Winter storms freeze those trapped in their cars. The open road offers no cover, no resources, no shelter, just endless exposure. You can't outrun hunger. You can't outmaneuver the elements. And you can't hide when every direction is a straight line. What makes evacuation routes truly fatal is the illusion they offer. They promise safety, direction, and hope. But once the world collapses, those long, clear roads become nothing but corridors of despair, leading not away from danger, but straight into the heart of it. Heart. Grocery stores and big box retailers might seem like the obvious first stop when disaster strikes, but in an apocalypse, they instantly devolve into some of the most violent and unpredictable battlegrounds imaginable. The moment fear hits the population, every single person has the exact same plan: get food, get water, get supplies, now. That shared instinct guarantees chaos. Before the infected even reach the doors, the real threat becomes the countless desperate people flooding inside with the same hunger in their eyes. The downfall begins within minutes. Shelves that normally take days to restock are stripped bare in under an hour. Entire aisles echo with the sound of shattering glass and frantic footsteps. People grab anything they can carry, hoarding canned goods, bottled water, batteries, anything that might buy them another few days of survival. Arguments ignite instantly. Someone reaches for the same item as you, and suddenly, a harmless gesture turns into a violent struggle. Panic erases manners. Fear erases morality. By the end of the first day, the store is unrecognizable. Carts flip over like barricades. Broken packaging covers the floor. The air fills with dust, sweat, and the sharp scent of spilled chemicals from shattered cleaning supplies. Every corner becomes a blind spot where someone might be waiting to ambush the unprepared. People don't walk anymore. They stalk. They listen. They look for weakness. Hunger transforms ordinary citizens into threats you can't reason with. But the danger doesn't end when the shelves empty. In fact, it gets worse. Once supplies run out, armed groups begin claiming stores as their territory. These aren't random looters. They're organized, ruthless, and fully aware of the strategic value of controlling the last remaining stock. They position themselves near entrances, seize any lingering resources, and use the building as a base where they can watch for weaker survivors wandering in. A store that once promised abundance becomes a fortress controlled by those willing to kill for the items everyone else took for granted. Disease spreads just as quickly as violence. Narrow aisles trap you in tight spaces where coughing, bleeding, and panic turn every encounter into a health risk. Cuts from broken glass become infections. Blood from fights stains the floor, trash piles up, bodies may lie abandoned in freezer aisles or hidden behind toppled shelves. All it takes is one infected person pushing through the crowd to turn the entire store into a breeding ground for plague. And even after everything has been looted, the building remains a threat. An empty store offers perfect shadowed corners for predators, human or otherwise, to hide. The structure's wide, echoing layout amplifies every sound, making it impossible to tell who or what is moving nearby. Survivors who enter hoping for forgotten scraps often leave empty-handed, if they leave at all. In an apocalypse, grocery stores don't provide safety or salvation. They become arenas of desperation where survival depends not on what you find, but on what you're willing to do, and how quickly you can escape once you realize you're trapped inside a battlefield disguised as a supermarket. Military bases are often imagined as the ultimate safe havens, fortified, disciplined, armed, and protected by trained professionals. But in an apocalypse, those walls and weapons don't guarantee safety. They guarantee conflict. Instead of becoming sanctuaries, bases transform into boiling pressure cookers where fear, authority, and desperation collide until the entire structure tears itself apart from the inside. The collapse begins with the flood of civilians. Every person within 100 miles sees the base as their best chance of survival and rushes to its gates. But military supplies are designed for soldiers, not thousands of unplanned refugees. Food runs out within days. Ammunition dwindles with every skirmish. Water reserves disappear as panicked crowds push and scream for entry. Guards at the gate struggle to maintain order as families beg for help, some pleading, others threatening, all desperate. And once those gates crack open, even a little, the flood cannot be stopped. Inside the base, tension simmers among the soldiers themselves. The chain of command, so vital in wartime, begins to fray when communication fails and officers disappear or panic. Different units argue over who controls the armory, who has authority, who makes the rules. Trust evaporates. Armed personnel begin forming their own factions, prioritizing their families over orders. The strict discipline that once held the base together dissolves into a chaotic mix of loyalties, rivalries, and survival instincts sharpened by military training. Then the raiders arrive. Organized groups of outsiders, bandits, escaped convicts, rogue militias are drawn to the base like vultures to a carcass. They know exactly what's inside: weapons, medical supplies, fuel, vehicles, and vulnerable civilians who can't defend themselves. With the military distracted by internal turmoil, raiders strike the outer perimeter, testing weak points, probing defenses, and launching coordinated attacks. Each assault drains ammunition and morale. Each breach spreads panic, and each victory encourages more predators to swarm the area. Meanwhile, The infected, if that's the threat, don't care about walls or rank. Once a single one gets inside, the entire base becomes a maze of deadly close quarters. Barracks, bunkers, and hallways designed to hold troops become choke points where everyone trapped inside becomes either prey or an unwilling combatant. Gunfire echoes through corridors. Smoke fills the air. Medics collapse under the weight of countless wounded. Fear becomes the dominant force driving every decision, with civilians, raiders, soldiers, and infected all fighting over the same shrinking space. The base devolves into a four-way war zone where no one fully controls anything. The very weapons meant to defend the nation become instruments of chaos as discipline shatters and survival instincts take over. Every shot fired attracts more enemies. Every explosion breaks another piece of the fragile order. Every decision feels like gambling with lives. In the final days, military bases don't resemble fortresses. They resemble ruins carved by violence and desperation. The walls still stand, but the safety they once promised is long gone. Inside, the strongest die protecting resources that won't last, the desperate fight for scraps of hope, and the infected tear through the remains of what was once the most secure place imaginable. In an apocalypse, a military base isn't a refuge, it's a battlefield waiting to happen. Prisons are built to contain society's most dangerous individuals, but in an apocalypse, they become structures of pure nightmare, where control collapses instantly, and the worst people imaginable are suddenly unleashed with nothing left to restrain them. These facilities are designed with the assumption that guards, power, and routine will always be there to enforce order. Once those elements vanish, a prison transforms from a place of punishment into a brutal battleground where only the most violent survive. The unraveling begins the moment the crisis strikes. Guards, faced with a choice between protecting inmates or saving their families, abandon their posts without hesitation. Security rooms sit empty. Surveillance monitors flicker with unattended feeds. Alarms blare into the void. Doors lock or unlock unpredictably as power systems short out. The staff who remain quickly become overwhelmed, trapped, or targeted by inmates seeking leverage or revenge. Within hours, the prison divides itself along brutal, primal lines. Inmates who were once kept apart, rival gangs, violent offenders, psychological cases, now roam the same corridors. Territorial disputes ignite instantly. Old grudges resurface with lethal force. Without guards to intervene, every hallway becomes a contested zone. Every cell block a miniature war front. Improvised weapons appear in seconds. Bars rip from beds, sharpened metal, broken pipes. Violence erupts with horrifying intensity because, for many inmates, this chaos isn't new, it's familiar. When the power grid inevitably fails, electronic locks that once controlled inmate movement malfunction. Entire wings open at once, allowing killers, rapists, and gang leaders to access areas forbidden to them for years. Others remain trapped in sealed cells, pounding the walls and screaming as fire spread. Smoke fills the air, or infected creatures breach the building. The sound of metal on concrete echoes through the facility like the rhythm of doom. Medical supplies vanish almost immediately. The infirmary becomes a target for both wounded inmates and opportunists, seeking drugs, bandages, or tools. Once overrun, it leaves the entire population vulnerable to infection, injury, and disease. Blood spills across floors, bodies accumulate in corners. Anyone weakened becomes prey, anyone alone becomes a target. And if the apocalypse threat itself, whether zombies, mutants, or infected humans, reaches the facility, the prison becomes something even worse. A labyrinth of tight corridors where escape is almost impossible. The concrete walls that once kept danger out now trap it inside with you. The infected move through dim hallways like shadows, turning the prison into a grotesque hunting ground where every cell block hides another horror. The most terrifying part is the unpredictability. These inmates aren't desperate civilians. They're individuals whose lives already revolved around violence, dominance, and survival. Their moral boundaries vanished long before society did. With no rules left, they form ruthless factions, enslave weaker prisoners, torture rivals, and seize control of any remaining food or water. Some might attempt to escape, others might choose to rule the ruins, a few might simply unleash chaos because nothing restrains them anymore. In the outside world, people fear the apocalypse. Inside a prison, they fear each other even more. In an apocalypse, prisons don't collapse, they erupt, and anyone caught inside or anywhere near them becomes trapped between human monsters and the inhuman terror spreading beyond the walls. There is no safety, no neutrality, and no mercy. Zoos and animal ranches may seem harmless at first glance. Quiet, peaceful places where families once admired exotic creatures from behind secure enclosures. But in an apocalypse, these sanctuaries unravel into landscapes of primal chaos. The moment keepers flee and systems fail, the animals inside awaken to a world without barriers, without rules, and without the calm routine that kept them docile. What was once a controlled habitat becomes a savage battleground where humans are no longer the observers, but the prey. The danger starts the moment the staff disappears. Zoo animals rely on daily feeding schedules, specialized care, and constant maintenance. Without keepers to lock gates, replenish food, or monitor enclosures, the infrastructure begins to crumble. Electric fences lose power, hinges rust and sag. Locks designed to withstand animal strength fail once they go unmaintained. One by one, the barriers separating predators from freedom give way. Large carnivores, lions, tigers, leopards, are the first to exploit the chaos. And they leap over weakened fences, squeeze through widened gaps, or simply wait until hunger pushes them into violent escape attempts. Once outside, they roam the grounds with heightened instincts, searching not for enrichment, but for prey. And in a world where humans move through the ruins unaware, these predators rediscover their ancestral nature in minutes. Every shadow, every rustling bush becomes a possible hunting ground, but the threat doesn't stop with those apex predators. Smaller but equally dangerous animals, venomous snakes, large reptiles, aggressive primates, emerge from shattered glass enclosures and overturned habitats. A single venomous snake unnoticed in tall grass, or a monitor lizard lurking in a maintenance corridor, becomes a silent killer. Animals that once entertained spectators now roam as unpredictable hazards driven by hunger, fear, and confusion. Herbivores, often dismissed as harmless, become lethal as well. Elephants panic and stampede through fences and buildings. Rhinos charge at movement with unstoppable force. Buffalo and other hoofed animals react to stress with deadly aggression. Their sheer size transforms panic into devastation, crushing anything in their path: cars, fences, or unlucky survivors. Disease lurks behind the spectacle. Many zoo animals carry pathogens humans rarely encounter. Without proper sanitation, their waste, bites, or scratches can transmit infections capable of spreading through weakened populations. A single contaminated wound can become fatal when hospitals no longer function, and as carcasses accumulate from starvation or territorial conflicts, scavengers move in. Coyotes, wild dogs, vultures, each introducing yet another threat of danger. Animal ranches suffer similar collapse. When feeding systems fail and fences break, domesticated animals panic, forming massive herds that trample property and cut off escape routes. Bulls, horses, and even frightened livestock can kill in moments of frenzy. Ranches become unpredictable landscapes of roaming animals, broken structures, and silent threats hiding behind every fence line. Within days, zoos and ranches evolve into chaotic ecosystems where every species, human included, is forced into brutal competition. You might hear roars echoing through empty parking lots, or see shadows stalking beside abandoned concession stands. Predators claim territories, prey animals flee in blind desperation. The entire environment shifts back to something ancient, something untamed. In an apocalypse, zoos and animal ranches aren't places of wonder. They're uncontrolled wilderness explosions where nature breaks free from every leash humanity ever placed on it. And those who enter these places expecting safety will discover too late that the old rules of captivity are gone, and the wild has taken everything back. Suburban neighborhoods, the quiet streets, trimmed lawns, and friendly smiles seem like the last places that would unravel in an apocalypse. But beneath their peaceful surface lies a volatile network of unspoken rivalries, mirrored resources, and fragile trust. When the world collapses, these communities transform faster and more brutally than anyone expects. The neighborhood barbecue, the shared driveway greetings, the casual weekend chats, all of it dissolves into suspicion and survival within days. The downfall begins when utilities fail. The moment the lights flicker off and the water stops running, every home becomes an isolated island with a finite pool of resources. Refrigerators warm, toilets stop flushing, medicine cabinets empty. Families look at their pantries and realize just how fragile their comfort always was. And then they look out their windows at the neighbors who are thinking the exact same thing. Suburbs are built on the illusion of abundance, but every household needs the same essentials at the same time. That synchronized desperation fuels rapid conflict. The Johnsons have a generator. The neighborhood knows because it's been humming for hours. The Smith family stocked extra water. The kids mentioned it at school weeks ago. The couple across the street grew vegetables in their backyard. The whole block noticed. In peaceful times, these details were harmless. Now they're life or death information. Neighborhoods fracture along invisible lines. Some streets form alliances, sharing tools, guarding entrances, and pooling limited supplies. Others collapse into hostility as residents barricade themselves inside their homes, pointing weapons at anyone who approaches. The homeowners association, once obsessed with lawn heights, becomes a paranoid militia, enforcing rules created in panic. Ordinary parents transform into armed defenders. Former friends accuse each other of hoarding. The same people who once borrowed cups of sugar now stalk one another's yards in the dead of night. Violence erupts faster than anyone anticipates. At first, it's subtle. Someone sneaks into a backyard to steal water, or a garage door is pried open in the middle of the night. Then come break-ins, armed confrontations, and frantic raids as families run out of essentials. The cul-de-sac becomes a war zone shaped by petty grudges and survival instincts. Every doorbell camera records scenes no one ever imagined. Every window becomes a sniper's vantage point. Even the quietest homes hide trembling hearts, loaded weapons, and whispered arguments about how to protect the children. Disease spreads just as quickly. Neighborhoods are tightly packed ecosystems, shared fences, shared sidewalks, shared air. One sick family infects another. Kids who once played together now unknowingly spread pathogens from yard to yard. With no medical care available, fevers rise, wounds rot, and fear of contamination drives families further apart. Suspicion becomes paranoia, paranoia becomes violence, and the suburban layout itself traps you. Cul-de-sacs funnel movement into predictable patterns. Dead-end streets, corner-fleeing families, uniform house designs make hiding nearly impossible. Even the manicured hedges and decorative fences become obstacles when you're running for your life. What makes the suburbs truly horrifying is the betrayal of familiarity. These aren't strangers. These are people you've known for years, people whose birthdays you celebrated, whose children played with yours, whose kindness you trusted. But in an apocalypse, hunger and fear override history. Friendships crumble, morality fractures, and survival becomes a competition between neighbors who once waved politely from across their perfect green lawns. In the end, the suburbs don't fall because of monsters outside. They fall because of the monsters' fear awakens inside ordinary people. Isolated islands are often romanticized as the perfect escape during an apocalypse. No crowds, no chaos, and a natural barrier of endless ocean. At first glance, it feels like the ideal refuge, a sanctuary cut off from the turmoil consuming the mainland. But that illusion shatters the moment reality settles in. Islands don't protect you. They trap you. They turn survival into a countdown. Each passing day, tightening the noose as resources vanish and hope drains away like water through cracked stone. The downfall begins with population overload. The moment rumors spread of an island safe zone, every boat owner, every desperate family, and every survivor with access to the shore makes the same decision. Thousands flee toward shores that were never meant to support more than a tiny local community. Within days, a peaceful island built for 100 residents swells with 10,000 frightened refugees. Tents appear on beaches, crowds spill into forests. Competition ignites instantly. Water becomes the first crisis. Islands rely on fragile freshwater sources, rain collection, small reservoirs, maybe a single treatment plant. These systems collapse under overwhelming demand. Wells dry, rain barrels empty. People drink from contaminated streams until disease spreads through the camp. Dehydration claims victims long before hunger ever has the chance. Food follows the same pattern. On a mainland, you can flee. On an island, you cannot. Hunting and fishing collapse under pressure as every survivor casts lines into the same shallow waters, stripping the ecosystem of life faster than it can replenish. Fish disappear. Shellfish beds die off. Small farms and gardens are trampled or looted. With no sustainable agriculture, panic seeps in. The ocean stretches endlessly around you, but none of it is edible. Fuel becomes the next death blow. The last boats run dry, engines fail, dockside gas reserves evaporate under the desperation of thousands. And when the final boat sputters to a stop, the island changes forever. You are no longer a visitor, you are a prisoner. The sea becomes an unbreakable wall. Storms roll in with no escape. Every horizon becomes a reminder that there is no rescue, no movement, no future beyond the shrinking resources beneath your feet. Then comes the psychological collapse. Isolation does not create peace, it magnifies fear. Survivors argue over water rights, food shares, access to the few sheltered buildings. Groups fragment into tribes, beaches become borders. Forest paths turn into ambush zones as desperation transforms once civilized people into predators. Darkness brings whispered fights, stolen rations, and quiet screams smothered by ocean winds. And nothing is more horrifying than the arrival of infection on an island. All it takes is one sick person slipping through the crowd unnoticed, one cough, one fever, one bite mark hidden beneath a sleeve. With nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, the outbreak spreads through the population like fire through dry grass. Panic explodes. People run to the beaches only to find no boats. They flee to cliffs with nowhere to go but down. Every shelter becomes a trap. Every hill becomes a dead end. When the island finally falls silent, it becomes a graveyard ringed by waves, beautiful from afar, deadly up close. A prison carved by nature, sealed by desperation, and consumed by the very isolation that once seemed like salvation. In an apocalypse, islands don't save you. They simply delay the inevitable while cutting off every path to escape. Remote flatlands seem deceptively peaceful during an apocalypse. Vast stretches of open earth beneath an endless sky, far removed from the chaos of cities, suburbs, and crowded shelters. At first, the emptiness feels liberating. No walls to trap you, no crowds to panic you, no shadows hiding predators, just silence, just space, just the wind brushing through tall grass that seems to stretch forever, but that same openness becomes your downfall. In a world where danger hunts relentlessly, being visible from miles in every direction turns survival into an unwinnable game. There is no cover, no concealment, no structure to protect you. Every movement you make sends a ripple across the horizon. Every step becomes a signal to anyone or anything watching from afar. Out here, you're not hidden, you're spotlighted. The environment is your first enemy. During the day, the sun becomes a merciless executioner. With no shade to break its glare, your skin burns, your lips crack, and sweat drains from your body until your vision blurs. Dehydration sets in faster than you can comprehend. You search for water, but creeks on maps are long dry, and any pool you find is either contaminated, stagnant, or guarded by thirsty wildlife. The ground itself radiates heat, turning the air into a shimmering haze that distorts distance and warps your sense of direction. Night brings the opposite horror. Temperatures plummet, sinking into bone-chilling cold. Without shelter, you shiver uncontrollably, each breath visible in the darkness. The wind whips across the plains with a lonely howl, cutting straight through your clothes and stripping warmth from your body. Sleep becomes impossible. Fire becomes dangerous, visible for miles, a beacon advertising your exact location. Then come the predators. Some are animals starved by the collapse of their ecosystems. Coyotes, wolves, wild dogs. They hunt in packs, following your scent long before you realize you're being stalked. Others are human, bandits, raiders, or desperate survivors who see you as an easy target, standing exposed on a giant canvas of vulnerability. Tracking you requires no skill. Ambushing you requires no strategy. Out here, you cannot hide behind a door, a tree, or even a shadow. Injuries become fatal. A twisted ankle means you can no longer run. A deep cut becomes an infection with no help in sight. A lost shoe, broken gear, or empty water bottle becomes a death sentence. There are no clinics, no supply caches, no abandoned stores, just endless miles of unforgiving terrain. Even your mind begins to unravel under the relentless monotony. The horizon never changes. The silence grows loud. Hallucinations flicker at the edge of your vision. You begin to feel watched even when nothing moves. And yet something is watching. Birds circle high above, tracking your weakening pace. Their shadows pass over you like warnings. Every creature out here operates on instinct. Find the weakest, wait for exhaustion, then close in. And with no shelter, no walls, and no escape routes, you slowly realize the truth. This place is not empty. It's full of things waiting for you to stop moving. In the end, remote flatlands don't kill you quickly. They kill you slowly, silently, and mercilessly through thirst, exposure, fear, and the crushing awareness that you are utterly alone in a place that offers nothing and takes everything. In an apocalypse, the wide open world becomes the largest trap of all, one where your only cover is hope, and even that fades long before you do. When we look across all these places, cities, hospitals, stadiums, islands, highways, suburbs, and all the forgotten edges of the world, we start to see a truth that's far more unsettling than any monster or disaster. The apocalypse isn't defined by zombies, viruses, or collapsing infrastructure. It's defined by how fragile our world really is, how quickly human systems fall apart, and how easily the thin threads holding civilization together can snap under pressure. In every location we've explored, survival doesn't depend on strength or speed alone. It depends on awareness, on understanding how environments twist against us when order breaks. And more importantly, it depends on recognizing that danger often comes not from the world outside, but from within ourselves. Fear makes people unpredictable. Desperation makes them reckless. And isolation tears at the mind in quiet ways that no weapon can defend against. Through all these deadly places, one theme repeats. The apocalypse magnifies everything: the fear, the hunger, the paranoia, the fragility hidden beneath everyday life. When society collapses, the places we once trusted become traps. The routines we once relied on become liabilities. And the people we once thought we understood become strangers, driven by instincts older than civilization itself. But in the middle of all that darkness, there is something else, something quieter, something stubborn. Survivors don't endure just because they're strong. They endure because they find clarity in chaos. They learn to navigate danger with patience, to understand themselves deeply, and to carry resilience even when the world tries to strip it away. Strength in an apocalypse isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's the quiet choice to keep moving forward, to stay alert, and to believe that your next step might still matter. If this story resonated with you, please share your sense of strength in the comments. And let's spread this quiet pride to the world.